Hello, welcome to Serious About Law, a periodic podcast that features serious conversations about law, legal education, and legal practice, hosted by me, Merritt McAlister, the Dean of the University of Florida Levin College of Law. We try to have these conversations while being serious about what we're talking about, but not taking ourselves too seriously in the process, and focusing on things that might matter to our community of future Gator lawyers, current Gator lawyers, honorary Gator lawyers, thinking about what's happening in legal education and legal practice around the globe, with a special tie-in to the University of Florida Levin College of Law and who is visiting our campus. I'm thrilled today to welcome our very first guest from our alumni community, as well as our very first international guest, so a twofer today. Rafael Sayagués, who is the managing partner and CEO of Deloitte Central America, Panama, and Dominican Republic, who is also a graduate of our amazing tax program from 1996, an LLM from UF Law. Rafael, thank you so much for being with us today.
No, thank you so much for having me. Extremely honored and happy to be here.
Well, we're always grateful to have Gators willing to come back. You've come back from some amount of distance and some amount of effort to get here today. So thank you for being on campus. Tell me a little bit, Rafael, about where you grew up, what your experience was like as a sort of a relatively young person, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. So born and raised in Costa Rica.
Where in Costa Rica?
San Jose.
Okay.
And my family, it's both a combination from my father's side, Spanish immigrants from the Civil War from the 1930s. My grandma, first generation Italian, and from my mother's side, pure Costa Ricans. So I was born and raised in Costa Rica and ended up even getting my first degree out of there. And then out of just pure luck and actually a lot of push, ended up having the opportunity of being a Gator in the mid-1990s.
We'll get there in a minute. Let's talk a little bit about what interested you in the law. Were you sort of an argumentative child who liked to make points? Were you, as someone who went into tax, maybe you were very detailed. Growing up, how did law get on your radar?
Well, I literally grew up in a legal family from my mother's side. My grandfather was a lawyer, pioneered in the creation of law firms that actually then specialized in international businesses.
Oh, wow.
He ended up being a congressman. He ended up also being a Supreme Court justice.
Oh, wow. In Costa Rica.
In Costa Rica.
Okay.
So clearly, let's say,
law was in the blood.
Law was always there, and it was very present. But interestingly, during my first years, I was very focused into science. And everybody thought that I was going to end up most likely into the science area, particularly most likely even the medical area,
really?
Which I liked. But once I was in high school, it was very clear which direction.
What made it so clear?
Well, I think that they couldn't make me shut up.
Okay.
So it was absolutely clear that I had some gift for that. And then I decided that law school was the place to be. But also, once I started my legal career, from the very early days in the early 1990s, tax was not very common. It was still very unknown. Let's be clear, during those days, even tax compliance in a lot of countries in Latin America was not very well structured. And I had the opportunity to start working as a law clerk in a Big Four.
Okay.
At that time, there were actually Big Six. That's how long ago that was.
So after law school in Costa Rica?
No, even during law school.
Okay, during law school in Costa Rica. Okay.
Because actually that's something interesting. In Costa Rica, you are actually able and allowed to work while you go to law school.
Oh, really?
So
okay.
Most people would actually like to get it's almost like permanent internships while you go to law school. So you will basically either work in the morning and they go in the afternoon, or work in the afternoon and go to school in the morning. And most people do that because that's what usually gives you some of the best credits to actually then get a job.
So are you getting paid, or is it an internship?
No, you actually eventually even get paid.
Okay. So like a more traditional apprenticeship model.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So that's how I basically started working in tax. And I literally decided from that time that, I was going to finish law school because I really wanted to basically end up in tax.
Okay. What about tax? Like, why tax? How does tax get on your radar? Because I think for many folks, whether you're a lawyer or not, tax feels very intimidating. So what was it about tax that sort of lit that passion for you?
Well, yeah, let's be clear. Let's say tax, it's binary. Either you love it or you absolutely hate it, right?
Okay.
Like it's very hard to say that someone says, "Oh, I like this part of tax." Now it's very, very binary. But the incredible thing about tax, and the reason I decided to go into that from day one, it's that it's an area where you can be extremely creative, which requires a lot of innovation, which clearly requires a lot of permanent studying and a lot of permanent research. You have to be up to date with everything. But it allows you to be in the forefront of everything that basically goes on from a business perspective. And the interesting thing is that in the what I will call like the old days, people will think about tax about something that was only relevant around like the end of the tax year when you actually had to prepare a tax return. And it was very focused on the traditional vision of that tax was actually an accounting practice.
Okay. Yeah.
But the concept of a tax lawyer basically started evolving when tax became not a compliance business, but an advisory business. And if you think about it, there is not a single transaction that you can do or anything that could happen in a business that is not going to have a tax effect.
Sure.
So if you are a tax lawyer that specializes in consulting, either domestic or international, you're going to end up basically sitting in the room where like all the transactions are decided, where all the structuring is being done, because you will be required then to provide support as to how that's going to play out.
Sure.
And the other thing is that in tax, we're usually the ones that actually end up saying if something goes or doesn't go. Because at the end, it's a matter of cost and it's a matter of opportunity. So if tax is going to make a transaction impossible, then there's going to be no transaction. There's going to be no business. There's going to be no deal. So what I loved was that you were able to basically participate in all types of industries, in all types of deals. You could be doing supply chain planning in the morning. You could be doing an M&A acquisition in the afternoon. You could be doing advice on telecom setups because that actually has a special tax that applies to that type of industry. So it gives you an extremely broad area of practice that you can develop.
That's great. It makes me a little jealous that I did not take any single tax class in law school, which is something I regret because we think the world's best tax program here at the University of Florida.
We absolutely do.
We absolutely do. And so I always feel sort of a deficit that I don't have any tax background. But let's talk a little bit about how you found us, right? Other than the fact that we have the world's best tax program, how did UF get on your radar from Costa Rica?
Well, it was mid-1994, getting close to graduating from my JD degree. And again, like at that time, there were no graduate programs locally. Barely a tax course was taught in school. There was nothing. And even from that time, I had actually determined that the future of tax was going to be international. And coming from a small country in Latin America, and in particular Costa Rica, that has very close ties with the U.S., a lot of the work that I did was actually with U.S. company, U.S. investors doing business inbound into Costa Rica and into the region that I worked in. And at that point, I said, well, you know what? The U.S. has, at that time, and I think still today, had most likely the most complex tax system in the world. So my conclusion was, if I can actually learn to practice in the most complicated tax system in the world, there is no country that I would not be able to eventually dominate. So I started doing my research at that time. Clearly, we didn't have internet, we didn't have Google and that, so it was harder to actually get, even from that time, the Business Week ratings and all of that, or the equivalents. And even from those days, UF was top 2. Program in the U.S. And so basically I took like the first 6 names. I decided which one's the one that I didn't even wanted to apply with. And then it basically applied to all the other ones.
Okay.
And after doing some research, I said, well, yeah, Harvard looks great and all these other programs, they're amazing programs. But at that time, there were like several professors that had actually moved to Florida, and there were some really interesting names that had an incredible reputation. And also because Florida, it had like a really good exchange program with students for Latin America. So I said, well, hopefully it's UF. So I started applying, and I basically would get letters from everybody, was getting acceptances. At that time, it was couriers, right? So it will take forever on that.
Days, yeah.
And I was not getting anything from UF at that point. So I had to come to Orlando for something else. And I actually wrote at that time to Professor Frill, which was the director of the program, and said, hey, I'm going to be in Orlando. Would it be okay if I visit the school? I would like to talk to you about the opportunities with the tax program. And he was extremely nice. And I'm pretty sure that he's saying, like, why is this guy from Costa Rica asking me for a meeting for the U.S. tax program? But he was super nice. And he says, sure, I'll come up. The school is closed because I think we were in a break or something like that. I think it was close to the year end. And so I ended up here. We started talking. And the first thing he said is, look, I was actually very intrigued of actually talking to you because, like, why would you want to do this? And I gave him my speech and I said, look, if I can learn here how to practice tax, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to practice anywhere else. I love the program. I love the idea of how this is structured. And that. So we started talking, and at the end he says, look, I don't think we've ever actually admitted anybody that it's not a USJD. Here, but let's do this. Send your application, and we'll figure it out. So I went back and sent everything, and I got my acceptance letter from this university to the other university to the other university, and nothing from UF.
Oh.
So it was about, I think, 6 weeks or something like that before I was going to go to Boston, that a courier finally arrived with my UF admittance letter. And that was like one of the happiest days that I've had because I was able to come to the program that I really wanted to do. And
that's great.
So I came here my first semester, and then went back, got married, and then came back with my wife that actually ended up doing also her research for her thesis down here in Gainesville.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. Well, I'm sorry that we played hard to get, it sounds like, but maybe that only strengthened the want to be here at UF. Tell me about your experience here in the tax program. It sounds like you had high hopes for it coming in. I hope those were satisfied and met. But what did you enjoy about the tax program? I will say one more thing, which is that I find that some of our most passionate alums are the alums who went through the tax program, who, despite only being here for a year, it's often seen as a very formative year for them. So tell me about your experience.
Well, let me put it this way. Those 12 months, I think I studied more during those 12 months than during my whole JD plus any other
See
thing
what I mean? It's
that I've actually
year.
done.
Yeah.
It's not an LLM, it's a boot camp program.
We'll cut that. We'll edit that out for the brochure. But
but it was great. And I think even though, let's say, especially for me, the first months were actually pretty hard because I had to deal with the tax program. And I actually had to do a comprise USJD basically like in 2 months just to level out with a lot of understandings from a U.S. law perspective that all my other, let's say, classmates already had, right? But what I loved was, like, number one, it's a small group, regardless of the size, it's a small group. And the interaction of actually just being here dedicated for those 12 months where you basically live, breathe, and every single minute it's basically dedicated to the program was an incredible experience. The interaction with the professors, like the way that the courses will taught, how they push you to the absolute limit on how to interpret some of the most arcane things that you can think of. Because let's be clear, U.S. tax code, I think it's like old Sumerian combined with Sanskrit. And for a foreigner to actually even comprehend that version of the English language was a thrill. But the way the program was structured was incredible. And then, like, the quality of the professors. One, for example, that was very important for me that also wanted to focus a lot on the international tax side is those were the days when we even had Professor Lockin here with us at the school. And that was basically most likely that course. It's the one that actually set the rest of my career today because it's where it was completely eye-opener as to what, like, the real concept of international tax practice could actually be like. And thanks to that, it's I don't know how many years now afterwards.
Built a career around
exactly.
it.
I'm basically here. And it allowed me during that year to actually truly define what was going to be the type of career that I wanted to develop. And not only as a professional, but even as an entrepreneur, what type of businesses I actually thought that could actually evolve as a result of my practice.
So after you graduated, which is in mid-90s, you returned to Costa Rica, or did you stay here? What was the trajectory?
Yeah, I graduated class of 1996. And if you remember, that was actually a year that was actually pretty tough.
It's a tough year.
It was a tough year. But the plan was always to stay and to basically practice and work in the U.S. But the firm that I had actually worked as an intern before in Costa Rica basically made me one of those offers which is like,
refuse.
you can't refuse. So it says, look, come back home and start a career with us and bring all that knowledge. And it was actually great because, it allowed me basically to go back down there. But it also then forced me to actually, as I said, start thinking about what was like the practice of the future that I wanted to build in that part of the world.
Yeah.
There was no concept of international taxation. Taxes were looked at something very domestic, very local.
Yeah.
So if you were a practitioner in Costa Rica, then you only talked about Costa Rica. If you were a practitioner about Guatemala or Dominican Republic or Panama, it was completely isolated. And they allowed me to basically start working on building like the first model of a regional practice that will basically then start deploying tax knowledge through more than one single jurisdiction.
Wow.
And that's how, let's say, a lot of the models that now we are even using today started in those early days.
So it sounds like you were on the cusp of something, right? You're sort of part of this new wave of that. How could you predict and see that? Like that, I mean, that's visionary at that time. What told you that was the direction that the practice was going to go in?
I think it had to do a lot with everything that was going on from primarily a foreign direct investment perspective.
Okay.
And again, I'm going to use Costa Rica as an example, but it could have been exactly the same, could have actually been said, for example, of Panama. There was a boom going on, especially with the offshoring. Remember that at that time is where like the offshoring started.
Sure.
And it was like the big offshoring towards China.
Okay.
And everything was moving to China.
Everything,
it was like the big push for that.
Right.
But there were then companies saying, maybe we can stay closer to the U.S. backyard. And they started looking at opportunities. And out of just pure luck, it was the time where a lot of new incentive regimes started popping up, like in different countries. And we worked on developing like the first incentive regime for the free trade zones, which actually became the model for investing internationally. And that's how we started getting companies, for example, and this is total public domain now in history, like when Intel announced that they were going to open a manufacturing plant in Costa Rica, everybody thought like they're crazy. Like how is Intel, like at that time was like the premier tech company gonna work on that? And they were pioneers. Literally, Intel transformed the whole concept of doing business abroad and transformed also in a way the economy of Costa Rica. And I actually worked on that project since the first day that they're doing scouting. And the same with that one with other, let's say, big multinational companies. And there's where it basically clicked. And it says, look, if this can happen with one, it can happen with two, it can happen with a lot. And if this can be done in Costa Rica, then for other types of industries, then we can do it in other countries. And also the late 1990s and the early 2000s were the years where also the economies of Latin America started in a way like specializing as to what they were going to focus on in attracting. For example, Costa Rica was moving from the old days where Costa Rica was one of the big textile locations. So all the Levi jeans, all the Wrangler jeans, and a lot of the clothing companies were basically having the big maquilas for textiles there. Well, all of those now were moving to Honduras or they're moving to El Salvador because the cost of labor was shifting. In Costa Rica during that time, it was very funny, like Conair opened a plant doing hair dryers and all those things. So people actually moved from doing jeans to assembling hair dryers. So it was a whole transformative process on the labor pool and the specialization. And the countries then started specializing. So now we said, you know what? So we can also specialize. So you want to do tech as part of the cluster around this company, then we can do this here. You want to do logistics and supply, then we can work out in Panama. You want to do textiles, then maquila regimes, we can do this. And therefore also then we said, this has to be regional. So tax is not going to be restricted by the boundaries of one single jurisdiction. We're basically going to deploy all this knowledge on how to do business, and then we're going to tropicalize it to the realities and, of course, to the regulations, because you have to comply with the laws of the country, but actually bring in all this innovation, all this creativity, all these ideas on how to actually structure the business and then tailor them and cater them to the reality of each of the markets.
I'm going to ask a fairly dumb question, so forgive me for that. But, you know, as folks might be listening to you who are thinking about law school or they're thinking about getting an LLM, they think tax law is like, I don't know, helping with tax returns or something. You're describing something that probably defies what they might expect that a tax lawyer would be doing, and certainly maybe not what they would anticipate a Big Four accounting firm to be doing, right? Because you were with EY, Ernst & Young, for a very long time, right? You've been doing a lot of this work through big accounting firms. Talk a little bit about the role of tax lawyers and accounting firms and the kind of practice you can have outside of just sort of a traditional law firm.
Yeah. Okay. So first, we're not accounting firms anymore. We're actually...
That's an important point, right?
Yeah. We're multidisciplinary professional service firms.
Okay.
But jokes aside on the acronyms and the names, clearly the Big Fours, they're still basically audit firms. But in reality, the largest businesses, for example, like right now, my new firm in Deloitte. Deloitte, it's the largest professional service firm in the world from any measure that you want to do it. Audit, it's one of their smallest practices.
Really?
The largest practices that we have, it's actually in the consulting side and everything on the advisory side. And there's been a shift where most of the services that have been exponentially growing have been primarily on everything related to the advisory side. So, and of course, now with technology and all of that, we can have a whole discussion on the future of the business and all that separately. But going specifically, for example, into tax, the old vision or the old idea of taxes, as you very correctly stated, was, oh yeah, that's just tax return work. It was very compliance driven. And that's still a big business. It's a big component of any firm that basically provides tax services. Compliance is still a very important part of it. Now, it's clearly the one that is more automated. It's the one that now it's going to be basically taken over big chunks of it by automation, RPA, and AI. But then the other side of the tax practice, it's basically, as I said, the advisory side or the consulting side.
Right, creative problem solving.
Exactly. And there it's basically either you are a troubleshooter. Basically, you are called when there's a problem that you need to solve that even may result in controversy, because there's a whole area of tax which relates to controversy and litigation, which is like a very specialized area. But the one that I like the more is the one where you're not a troubleshooter, you're actually a creator. You're an innovator, which is that, okay, we want to do this business or we want to launch this product. Okay, let's design like the best corporate structure. Let's design the best supply chain model. Let's design like how the distribution should look like. And when you think about it from an international point of view, globalization created this new concept, which is that, remember, we're like the whole, like the world is flat, where it like, okay, I would have a great idea for a product that was born in the US. So the IP for that, it's in the US. But then, okay, now I have to manufacture my idea. Then, of course, okay, I'm going to go to China, set up a manufacturing plant in China. That's your manufacturing side. Then I want to have distribution. Well, the best distribution is going to be a hub out of Singapore and then a hub out of Panama free trade zone to distribute to the Americas. But I also want to have a trading company. So I'm going to go to Ireland that has a very specialized trading platform. So the way that you set up the supply chain now on a global basis. That's basically the new version of tax consulting.
Wow.
On the international side. So you start looking at the map and then the macro, and then you go into the micro of like the specific country. Okay, how this actually works here. And at the end, then you end up with a structure where you're going to most likely end up doing business with 10 different countries, just like from IP to customer. Yeah. So that's just a simple example of basically what you can actually do now in the tax side. Let's say that you don't get in this part of the planning and you love transactions. There's not a single M&A deal that tax is not one of most likely the three pillars of the transaction. And nowadays, sometimes like tax is the go, no go of a deal. Because if you're on the buyer side, depending on how much exposure you're finding and whether you can negotiate or not an indemnity on that, there is no deal.
Right.
But the whole due diligence, the research side, it's almost like even the forensic side sometimes of what it's in there.
Yeah.
That's even a whole other area. So you end up becoming basically like parallel to the investment bankers, you become a part also of the team that's going to be working on the deal. So you would have the investment banking doing the financial and the commercial negotiation, but at the end, whatever they negotiate on the commercial side, you're the architect that has to see, okay, how is the structure going to look like to do this deal? If I'm a buyer, should I buy out of a European holding company? Do I buy directly out of the US? Or do I set up a company in XYZ jurisdiction? Do I do the financing from my captive financial entity in Europe? Or do I actually do bona fide debt out of a third-party bank? How do I maximize leveraging the acquisition? How do I step up the basis of the asset? So even there's another big component. And I can go on, let's say, multiple areas where it's like taxes are always going to be part of that. So it's not tax returns.
You've thoroughly convinced me. You've also convinced me that it's quite fascinating just as a project. And I know we were joking earlier, you rack up a lot of frequent flyer miles, I'm sure, with just how you're describing the structure of an operation. You're in a fairly new role as the managing partner CEO. You've been an owner for a long time. So you've been both doing the work, but you're also managing an enterprise. Talk a little bit about those different hats, right? You also have to be the boss of a bunch of folks as well, right?
Yeah, it's and that's been basically like it's a journey.
Yeah.
And it's a journey that never stops, and there's always new challenges. With our previous firm, we basically started it like 23 years ago, and we basically took over a brand and grew it like into like the largest professional service firms in my part of the world.
Wow.
And a few months ago, you have one of those opportunities where it's like, everything it's always, let's say, open for business, right? So we were able to do this great transaction with our new brand with Deloitte. And so we were able then to integrate all our businesses in these 7 countries into the Deloitte Spanish Latin America organization.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about like the professional services firms is that people think that you're just basically a whole bunch only of, let's say, professionals that basically share offices and just execute on that. But at the end, it's also a business.
Right.
And,
you got to grow the business.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And the way that I explain it always to every single year to our new interns and to the new kids that we recruit, and that is, I will say, look, forget that you are an accountant, forget that you are a lawyer, forget that you're an economist, that you're an engineer or a systems IT guy or anything that we recruit. You are an entrepreneur. And the only difference is that you decided that instead of selling widgets or manufacturing X, Y, and Z, you're basically selling services. So you need to look at the services as an actual product and as an actual industry, and you have then to see it through the lens of an entrepreneur, of a business person.
Yeah.
And that was the way that I was taught. I had like the privilege of having like 2 of the most amazing mentors since my early days. Actually, the partner that I started the business 23 years ago, I have been with him since I was 19 years old.
Oh, wow.
And he's retiring this year.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about everything that I learned from him and from the person that used to be the managing partner of the organization, the previous organization I was with, is that we always looked at this not as a firm per se, but we looked at it as a business.
Yeah.
So you need to understand that the other great thing about this is that, well, you can love practicing, and that's absolutely great. But there's also a career, and there's also an opportunity for you to also grow on the business side and on the management side. And that basically means being involved in every single area of the business as any other business. There's marketing, there's CRM issues, there's ERP accounting issues and systems, there is infrastructure, there is talent and HR. So all of that at the end basically allows you then to have a way more broader capacity and opportunities to grow.
Yeah, I think, students sometimes think that practicing law is just, you're writing a brief, you're going to court, right? But most attorneys at some point in time are business managers too, right? Whether you're a small firm or a large firm, right? It's a business that's selling services, as you described.
It's a business. You have to balance the book, you have to pay the bills, and you need to generate the cash.
Right. As for students who are thinking about, I want to practice law, or I want to go to a lot of our students want to go to big law, quote unquote, which I think is a very fine career path. I started in big law as well. They might not always be thinking about professional services firms, right? They might not realize that Deloitte is the largest in the world and has all of the kind of complexity that's going on that you described. Give the pitch for maybe not starting at a law firm and thinking more seriously about a professional services firm.
Well, one of the great things is that the way that we describe ourselves is like we can be the first best job that you can ever have for the rest of your career, either with us or as an alumni with someone else. And the reason for that is that the multidisciplinary professional services firms like ours, it's literally based on the apprenticeship model. Like you need to recruit every single year a huge amount of talent. There is a learning curve that takes a lot because then you have to be trained either in audit or in tax or in financial services or in consulting, in whatever area you bring in. And so literally, people are getting paid to learn and to develop skills. And we most likely have, together with some of the other, let's say, great firms that are there on the strategy side and the other consulting firms, one of the great things is that we most likely have some of the best learning programs that you can actually think of. And it's not only on the technical side. Like you will learn soft skills. You will basically learn a lot of things that you need, not only to do your job, but that can be literally just moved out into whatever role you decide to practice.
Yeah.
So if you want to basically have a more rounded development and let's say be exposed to learning things from multiple areas, this is a great opportunity. So if you basically start in tax, you're going to be interacting with the corporate side of legal and all of that, but you're going to be dealing with the consultants that are building out an AI model that is going to be deployed to actually run this app for this company. So you're going to be talking to the engineers that are working on that. You're going to be participating in a financial deal where you're raising capital and you're going to do like a private bond issuance. So you're going to be dealing with the capital market people. So you're going to learn about how that works out. Then you're going to be called out and you're going to be working with the auditors that are basically issuing very complex opinion of the financial statements of a publicly traded company. And they need to understand the complexities of X, Y, and Z that is your expertise. So the exposure to talent and to different types of professions and expertise, there are very few organizations that can actually give you that broad experience. So for the first years, even if eventually you decide that your career path is with industry, or it's still in the professional service firms, but on a very different role, or if you want to evolve, let's say, to a law firm or to something differently, what you learn there, it's going to be with you for the rest of your career.
You've gotten a broad base exposure.
And you have the mobility. You have an organization that has offices in more than 100 countries.
I know.
So you can actually have exposure. And I forgot to mention that. You have exposure to all these different practices. You also deal with people from all over the world. That they're just a Teams contact distance of talking to you. So your network and the contacts that you can develop internationally just by being part of that organization are also going to be like priceless in the future.
Yeah. I want to wrap up here, sort of looking ahead. You mentioned thinking about technological change and how that's impacting. And it's even a through line, and as you just described, the sort of evolution of manufacturing in Costa Rica, right? Going from textiles to hair dryers to, there's sort of two levels on this, right? One, how are AI and technology and the rapid sort of pace of disruption in that space, how is that impacting what you do, but also what you see in terms of economic growth in the region? So sort of on two levels, what are you seeing and observing?
Well, that's most likely one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest areas where we're dedicating a lot of our thinking time right now, and a lot of our action and a lot of our capital. There's basically two camps right now with regards to everything that's going on and let's talk about AI in the broad sense, because it's like the whole digitalization and the whole transformation from a digital perspective that's going on. And it's the people that think that it's a huge disruption, and then the people that think that it's a huge destruction of value.
Okay.
I am in the camp that, number one, AI is here to stay. Like, whether it's hyped or not, whether it's overvalued or not, those are just basically issues related to, let's say, the business side of the business model. But the technology is here. It's real. And the same as what happened with internet in the early 2000s, AI, it's basically going to become part of our daily life.
Yep.
And if we think that it's already part of it, like, it's exponential every year what it's changing. Like, if you look at the Deloitte reports on tech trends of how things evolve, you don't even talk about 12 months now. You literally just talk about, like, certain things change on a very short period of time, and exponentially. Professional services, it's definitely, for sure, one of the industries that is going to be heavily impacted. Sure. So the question is, what do you do? Whether you just basically surrender and you basically said, okay, let's let the robots take over and let's automate everything. Yesterday, there was something in one of the TV shows. They were talking about this company that their whole finance department for a $100 million company, it's one guy.
Wow.
They basically already are using agents for every single function of the finance, accounting, treasury, and controlling department. And there's just one guy that controls all the agents. Maybe that's very future forward, but it's reality. That's happening today. So that basically means if you look at that example of the company, those are 7-8 positions that were not hired.
So that's a great efficiency gain,
It's a great efficiency, but then what happens with all the people?
Right.
I actually truly believe that AI can and has to be used to basically magnify human capacity.
Okay.
It's not one or the other one.
It's not replacing.
It's not a replacement. Okay. Let me rephrase.
Yeah.
There are things that will be replaced because clearly automating is going to be more efficient. And let's be clear, these are businesses. So you still need an ROI. You still need to basically demonstrate that you're generating more or saving via expenses or whatever. But at the end, it's how you focus the development and the implementation towards generating the best value of your people. So you can have the same amount of people, but if you put agents to work with that, you're multiplying capacity. So now your talent can be retrained to actually do high-end work and to do added value work instead of actually doing repetitive work.
Sure.
So you don't need now 100 juniors to go through spreadsheets.
Right.
Clearly, that's going to be done by an AI agent that you're going to create.
Right.
But you can train them then to do the second level review of that part or focuses on other areas.
Right.
Now, the real challenge is, how are you going to redefine the new educational model?
Yeah.
Not for the future, but for literally tomorrow.
Right.
And what's the retooling and the reskilling for that population?
Right.
And if the G7 countries are having trouble figuring that out, just imagine in my part of the world how that's playing out.
Sure.
The only quote unquote good thing is that technology gets with a delay at certain levels. So we may have a little bit more of time to get our act together before, let's say, a lot of the big changes actually are implemented and they start cascading from top to bottom. But the reality is that this is my personal opinion. We're in one of those moments where it's like, if government, society, and business community don't get together to figure out how we're going to deal with all this transformation, then things could get complicated. Because again, these technologies are here to stay. Now we need to figure out how we're going to retrain and retool everybody to live with that. I'm in the camp that this is a huge opportunity. But it's going to require a lot of dedication and a lot of effort for it to really work out.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end on here, as we are in an AI university here at UF with an aim that we want to be very much a part of that re-education and training for our alums and for the future of the workforce. So thank you, Rafael, for being here and sharing your thoughts. And you've certainly made me think twice about my own career path, because it seems like what you do is really fascinating. So really appreciate your time and getting you back here to Gainesville. So thanks for visiting with us.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Loved being here.
All right. Go Gators.
Go Gators.
All right. Thank you.